Eccoci qua! Ciao ragazzi!
Ciao
Ciao.
Sara.
I'm always very excited when I manage to make it work. I realize that it's embarrassing, but here we go.
Don't
So
worry, we share the same issues. It's
there's that
quite
moment,
frightening.
that moment that I see the faces and I'm like, okay, I've
It's a
avoided
relief, right?
embarrassment.
Yeah.
So chat to both of you, and I would go straight into leaving to two of you of telling us about you, about Forma Fantasma as a name that I suppose is also a manifesto, and yeah, here we go. I pass it to you.
So, well, as you know, we are both Italian, but we have our studio is based in Amsterdam. And quite some years ago, we actually decided to choose Forma Fantasma as a name because it is in a way manifesto, as you just said, because our way of working and intending design is not just focused on form and aesthetic, but it's actually much more research-based. And in this process, then, in a way, the shape, the form is sort of a ghost because Fantasma means ghost. And it changes and adapts according to the context we are working with or the clients and the kind of subject we are looking into.
And yes, we are based in Amsterdam since already more than 12 years. We studied here in Eindhoven, the Design Academy in Eindhoven. We opened the studio first in Eindhoven, and then we moved around 5 years ago in Amsterdam. But we are working internationally.
If you want, we can show you the studio.
Scusa, go.
No, I was just saying, if you want, we can show you where we are. Since it is also
yeah,
sunny.
that would be amazing. I think that would create. Do you want to show a little bit of your studio?
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Okay, why don't we go around?
You know, it's sunny, so it's pretty
nice.
Yeah, strangely enough, it's kind of sunny today.
Nice.
And, well, let's say that today the studio, of course, is empty because all the guys are working from home remotely. We are still into the lockdown here in Amsterdam. So we have a lot of lights.
Beautiful.
And while we have also the kitchen where we have, you know, like lunch all together. And, you know, we have models and we have...
Can we see a little bit of the models and the books that you have at the back, just to kind of have a peep on your secret libraries?
Well, here we have more, let's say, material sample of previous projects. Like these are, for instance, a project that we did a couple of years ago with Gallery Bestsellers in London. And it's a material sample that we extracted from lava. And, you know, you can see here some of the samples we did.
Basically, what we did with that work was really to understand if from volcanic ashes, we could develop materials, non-extracted materials. And so basically, we took like volcanic rocks and then worked them as if it was any other material. So we fused them. And then what we realized that when you fuse them, they become much more similar to glass than anything else. So, and then in the process, it changed over time. And we also recently developed a series of tiles with glazes developed with volcanic ashes. And
does this create stronger properties of resistance or?
Well, what is interesting is not really the resistance, but maybe, you know, a lot of people don't know this, but to make glazes, what you need is minerals, and minerals needs to be extracted. But of course, that is a very invasive process, while volcanic ashes, because the Etna volcano in Sicily is still active, it's basically the mountain that is acting as a miner and expose these materials. So you don't need to mine the ashes to actually produce the glazes. So as you can understand, the ecological concern is really part of our work.
Of course. And above there is the models. So you do your small size models of the product that you develop?
Yes, we really like to work with paper, and we do sometimes very tiny models, such as this one. And and then we move up in scale and we do cardboard models so to test the prototypes, or wooden models. And well, here we have another piece we did a lot of years ago using bladders, and in this case blowing glass within a bone, actually using the bone as a mold. So we like to work with materials and experiment with it.
Very interesting. So this is your studio, and you have a separate house, or you have like many of the people that we have talked with, studio and home is combined?
Exactly. It's studio and home combined. We have an extra workshop, which is another side. Basically, here there is a mezzanine. Let me see if I can show you. And then we, we have the mezzanine, which is where we actually live, our house. And then the studio where we work with the guys here, there, here. And then we have an extra room at the bottom of the corridor. And, we like to keep it informal. And as you might know, in the Netherlands, the weather is not the best. So working from home is handy.
Of course. Now, how can you manage to create a moment of separation? Do you end up working 7 days a week and infinite hours, or you are very disciplined?
Very disciplined.
Very
Especially
good.
him.
Very good.
Yes, I'm quite good at that in kind of keeping the schedule quite tight. So, and of course, I mean, also if you're a couple and working together, you kind of really need to keep a very tight rhythm. So usually we have, from when we wake up till 9:30 when we start to work, we have a walk all around here. We are in the north part of Amsterdam that is quite green. And then when we finish working every day, we kind of get out again from home and either go to sport or to walk again. So we try to keep this kind of very precise schedule. But I'm quite precise as a person, I have to say. So.
Okay, Simone is the one that, no, let's finish and stay at work. So a question from you, where do you get the inspiration? Like, how does it work? It's so important, your process. How do you actually move from one project to another one, and where do you get the inspiration?
Well, I think in our case, I sometimes think that more than inspiration, because of the amount of visual informations we have every day and data and articles we can read through the internet, we often think we need much more moments of digestion than inspiration. So actually our inspiration comes more from sometimes periods of isolation. And we still don't speak Dutch, so which is horrible, but it's sort of like a nice bubble for us to be sort of in this studio and protected and concentrated.
So I want to know more about Cambio that you're working on, that you've done for Serpentine, but maybe just to remain on this point about digesting, we're now in a limbo, a sort of bubble. So is there anything that in this moment it kind of came to your mind as a relevant topic that you would like to develop?
Well, I think honestly, because of our exhibition Cambio that you mentioned, we, strangely enough, it's probably a very time, we did it horribly in the right moment, in the sense that it deals a lot with the ecological implications of production and with, the problematic of making production sustainable, focusing on timber, the industry. So in a way, what we would wish and what we are trying to do is to continue this beyond the exhibition. And also in September, we start the geodesign department in Eindhoven, which we will be leading. And so that is for sure both a source of inspiration, to be educators, but also very something we are looking forward to start working with the students. Yeah,
something that we are for sure looking forward is try to think about different way of designing, also not only for human, so for all the other species that are inhabiting the planet. Like designs so far has been all the time concentrating on the well-being of human, but what can we do not only for us? And I think that's something that we are going to be preoccupied much more and more in the future of the studio work. So that's what we are looking for at the moment.
So do you want to kind of give a little bit of insight on Cambio? There's been a lot of articles, but a lot of people that follow us are not necessarily design literate. So maybe that can help.
Sure. Well, Cambio is an exhibition that came to exist because of Anzorek Obrist and Serpentine. Anzorek is the director of Serpentine in London, that they asked us to do their third design exhibition. And in a way, the commission was great because they gave us, of course, a lot of freedom, But
Nice.
the only thing they asked us, they said, well, Zurich said, we are interested in doing design, but not necessarily in showing products, but more to show the way of thinking of designers. And for us, this was extremely interesting because we could do something which was going beyond the object in a way. And so the exhibition is focusing actually on timber and the extraction of timber from forests. And the whole exhibition is a conversation with scientists, philosophers, activists, and other practitioners that can help us all understanding the complexity of dealing with the natural environment and how some of this knowledge that, of course, we designers don't have can be possibly implemented in design. For instance, considering how trees absorb CO2 and the CO2 is then stored into wood. And so what it means to produce with this material, how can we make it last longer? And all these kind of preoccupations. And to the point that we also involved the lawmakers and other professionals to really trying to see if design can be helpful also to deal with these sort of more complex issues.
And why did you call it Cambio?
Well, Cambio refers to, of course, to the idea of change. And, you know, I think it's something that is very important to point out. But actually, Cambio...
Oh, sorry, I think we should also mention what Cambio means because we give
in
it
Italian is change.
Yeah, exactly. But Cambio on a botanical side actually refers to a small layer between the bark and the inner part of a tree.
Ah, okay.
So there are few cells that actually are the one they are building the wood part of the tree, so the historical side of the tree, but it's also the one that is communicating with the outside world. So we really like this idea of this layer that is able to adapt to situation and to kind of look forward while building the history of the trees in itself.
And I saw from some of your videos that you were in Italy when we had the big thunderstorm and that destroyed a lot of trees. Was that the moment when you started thinking about this idea, or it has different origins?
Actually, it is interesting that you mentioned that because when we started working on the exhibition, it was exactly in the days that the storm that destroyed 13 million trees. Yeah, it was horrible. It was 2018. We were at the beginning of the process of thinking what to do at Serpentine. And at the beginning, we weren't thinking necessarily about that. But that, of course, had a huge impact in us because it was the first time that we could witness clearly and experience the impact of climate change in our environment to the point that it was really, I mean, absolutely shocking when we saw it there.
Yeah, for all of us, I have to say.
Yeah.
So because a lot of the mountains where a lot of us go and ski, it's a very familiar place. It's not, it suddenly hits you that this can happen to you. So that
also think in Europe we will never witness such a huge event that destroys so much earth and trees and environments. And we came back more than one time there, and I have to say every time we get back there it was kind of shocking. At the beginning you are fascinated by also the beauty of disaster, but then the feeling is all the time kind of to be almost disgusted by it. It's very overwhelming when you visit. And
how's that impacted on the people that live there? Because that's also a very interesting part, the implication of this kind of disasters.
Absolutely. Well, there's a lot of implications because basically, if you don't remove the trees from the forest, rotting the trees can contaminate the rest of the environment. So the local communities, they're all busy removing these trees. But of course, because they sustain themselves a lot with the selling of timber, at the beginning there was a lot of problems because, of course, the prices were, have
completely gone down.
Nevertheless, they have been good enough to manage it properly and to find good ways not to sell out the timber. And especially in the Val di Fiemme in Trentino, they are really managing the situation quite professionally and working constantly in removing the trees.
That's very interesting. So you've worked a lot with museums and with instead brands. Also fashion brands, unfortunately still not Valextra, which is, we've tried, we will manage sooner or later. But so what is the different approach, if any, of having more of a commercial industrial partner or more an institution and a cultural institution?
But of course, with cultural institution, you can always be much more, let's say, experimental and research-based. And when you work with the commercial partner, of course, you try also to respond to the needs of the brand you're working with. Nevertheless, we always try to be critical with what we can do to improve or to add something in a production that for us it makes sense for us and for the brand. And of course, what we wish for the future is to try to bridge even more our more experimental side with the more commercial one, and to possibly take the knowledge we are acquiring with the experimental work to the industry.
Also, I think more we are going ahead with the work, more also the way company are approaching us is changing, because of course now people are also much more aware about topics that we are dealing with, but also people are starting to get how we work. So when we get approached now is getting the brief are much more precise, but something that we do practically all the time is to rewrite the brief. So that's something that we are quite probably famous for. It's really rewriting the brief from the client.
We're never okay with a brief.
Exactly.
Which is good. It's the reason they want you, If not, they don't need the Forma Fantasma. But the idea of working in a team, but being in two, it's how does this duo works? Can you give us a little bit of the insight, because it's
Are you sure
I can't do anything with my husband. I love him to death, but we can't even decide where to put the bottle in the table. So how do you manage to build on each other?
Well, actually, this is a very good question, because of course it is very complex and we argue a lot. We really argue a lot. That's a daily practice, basically. And the people that work with us, they know that there's going to be a lot of arguing. But it's also normal, because the way we work is actually exactly through conversation and discussions. And, what we are lucky, because the aim is all the time clear for both, and it's the same. So we never argue about the final aim. We can argue about the process how to get there. So words, in a way, is very important for us. A conversation, and sometimes we even write, because it helps us to clear our mind and to focus. And of course, at the end, then we sketch, we make models. But
do you do it separately? So each of you writes and after, or you write together?
That's also the annoying part. No, but that is really upon the annoying part, because we are doing everything together. So sometimes it's super frustrating, because I'm writing, like I'm really typing in the computer, then he's like dictating me, or it's the opposite. And sometimes it's also time consuming, because we are not able really to do things too much on our own. Even I have to say, in our way of working changed radically when we started to teach, because actually we were teaching on different departments. So I had my students, Simone has his own students. And also every day you speak with, 15 students, you need to review 15 projects. So that helped us to kind of like quickly respond to requests and to ideas. And that kind of approach it's the same we are using also in the studios. So, I mean, we have a great team of people working in the studio, but we are good in kind of really, I hope, to manage them, and through discussion.
So let's go back to this thing of teaching. Now, teaching is very difficult because you really have to aim to get the people to absorb. So in this case, you are teaching two different classes. So you're not teaching together. Is that correct? I understood?
It was like that. And then from next September, we will start our own department in Eindhoven. And so we will be together again.
Okay, just not to make sure that
we miss each other.
So what is for you the most important skills to teach and to really touch and excite the heart of students?
I think there's several things. I think definitely the first one is that you should always remind yourself that the students are not you, and you're there to help them with their own ideas, not with yours idea. And there's a lot of mentors, I think, that are not able to divide the two, you know what I mean? To recognize the skills of the others. So that is the first. And I think that the second is teaching, asking very important questions. What I mean to say is, instead of telling them what they should do, you should ask questions that could help them to understand which is their own position. Yeah.
And then for me, it's also quite important to kind of treat students as already designers, because something that we were experiencing, witnessing when we were studying, for instance, in Italy, you know, there is all the time this vertical way of teaching. You know, there is the teacher and there is the mentors. While I think from our experience also here in Eindhoven, we kind of learned that working on the same level of the students is helping a lot in the relation. This doesn't mean that there's no respect between each other, but the kind of discussion you have is much more mature, because you give the tools to the students to be already, you know, a professional, so mature and responsible.
And new generation are definitely asking for interaction and participation, and we see it across every industry. So I think that's very important. And this leads me to another point that is really digital. And I think the lockdown has kind of forced even the less digital to become a little bit more digital. What's your point of view about digitalization of the world and what kind of implication has it in the life in general and in your work in particular?
Yeah, well, I think that, of course, as always, we should remind ourselves that technologies of any kind, they're always tools. So what is important is applying them with meaning and in the, let's say, in a meaningful way. So in these days, we see a lot of the potential of using digital tools to, for instance, having these conversations. But also our exhibition Cambio, which is closed now, it's somehow living through either a website we develop or our Instagram account, all conversation we are having. So we think it is extremely great that we have these tools available. Of course, we also know all the downside of the impact of digital technologies on our lives. I think what is important is that once the lockdown is over, we will be able to discern and to recognize what is the good part of it and what is the dangerous one. So, for instance, we definitely already decided we're not going to travel as much as we were doing before for lectures and workshops, because we will try to do it digitally.
Yeah, and for me, it's also very interesting how in these days everybody is using tools that, you know, since a couple of years ago, they were only using to kind of promote a certain lifestyle. Instagram, of course, is an example, but then everybody is using it much more to communicate on a deeper level. You know, the discussion we are having today, probably a couple of years ago, was not even considered in a platform like Instagram. And I think
I love very much also that the content is prevailing to the form. Whereas in the past, maybe, you know, going in Instagram and just going live would have been an absolutely no. Today is, you know, it's important, really, the content. I think that's really beautiful. But you said people will avoid the bad part of the digital part. I'm curious to understand what for you is the bad part, because...
Well, we all know there are problems connected to addictions to digital tools. There are problems connected to surveillance and data and privacy.
Of course.
I think these are all things that we need to address, both as citizens and as designers. I'm thinking about bullying online or rudeness online, which is I mean, it's unacceptable, but you still find a lot of aggressive people that are using digital tools to take out the worst of themselves, and I think that we should all address that when we see it, because it's terrible.
No, so we're talking about the physicality, no? You were talking about how much investigate materiality, and there's an element of physicality that is very big. The ability to use all your senses that somehow now is only visual and auditive, no? So sorry, I interrupt, Andrea.
No, but it's true. But in a way, what I wanted to add, that in any case, refer a bit what you are talking about, the physicality of it. Because when we use like digital tools, we all the time think that we don't have an impact when we do it. But even this conversation is causing, in any case, releasing of CO2 and has an impact in the real world. So I think every time when, as a user, we are using these kind of tools, we really need to investigate the impact that we are having. So also the way we are using it, even if they look so light, well, they have an impact. It's actually measurable. So it's important to
be aware of that.
To be aware of that.
And there's one thing that for me, I'm a little bit obsessed, because was one of the things that I was somehow proud of, this sharing economy. Now, somehow is one of the things that I was seeing developing, the sharing of cars, the sharing. I thought was a great way. I think Holland has always been far in advance of other countries, but there was this point about wasting less. I was in Los Angeles last year, and I was like shocked about the amount of cars with single drivers inside. And what do you think this coronavirus, the pandemic, and so the fact that people are scared to use things of others, do you think is going to be long lasting? Have you thought about it or not?
Well, I think it is difficult to measure the way the virus will impact our lives, because we are still digesting, the process. I think what I'm worried the most is actually in which way the virus will impact ourselves on a psychological level. And I think what we notice the most is that the cities we live in, they are, of course, fantastic and beautiful and so on. But nevertheless, they during the pandemic, they also show their weaknesses. I think we're all locked down without a possibility of communicating in safety with people. So I think and I hope that the virus will put in front of the agenda the necessity of thinking our cities in ways that, for instance, can facilitate conversation, it can facilitate empathy between people, and also the life in cities in a way that is much more healthy than just living in 20 square meters.
Yeah, exactly.
And then
well,
going out.
There are beautiful examples in certain cities, like in the central Italy, like Garbatella in Rome. This beautiful neighborhood that was designed in the 20s, where there were like all these houses, all different from each other. They had like this courtyard communal where people could like meet and wash their clothes and cultivate. And still, those kind of systems would work perfectly in a pandemic. So this means, and this shows how completely the way we are thinking about city is nonsensical, and we should completely change ideas about how cities are built.
So in terms of design and the role of design, architecture, urbanistic, do you think something will change? And we have Maria Cristina Didero saying hello. Ciao, Maria Cristina.
Ciao.
So do you think there's going to be a new role, a more integrated role, or
I hope so. I mean, what's already is happening in Milano in these days. I know that, for instance, SARA is trying to promote as much as possible bicycle, and in 2 weeks they already put like bicycle path all around the city. If you want, things can happen. It can happen also very quickly. So I hope this will happen more and more. I think cities should kind of become empty from cars, for instance. We should promote a different way of mobility in the city. Like, for instance, Milano, it's a super small city. You can really walk from one place to the other. Trees should be planted much more in the cities, and
facilitate the redesign of the city according to the needs of humans.
Yeah,
because that's what we need, basically. It's nothing more than that.
So we are hoping that all of you will help us to convince our politicians. It's a complicated topic, very complicated, this one, I think, but a necessity. So instead going back in the home, now it's a question that I like asking everyone, because I think we all been at home and looking at not using it anymore as a place where we just go to sleep and run away. Have you thought about what can change to make your home a happier environment? What is what do you guys do to make it? Have you changed something to make it a little bit more cozy or more? I don't know.
We are lucky enough that we have a small garden, and actually that is what is
already a lot.
Yes, and then this has nothing to do with the house, but we are going to get a puppy soon, and I think that is what it will really improve our life.
So while we made a lot of changes, but it's more to make the house a bit more safe.
For the puppy. So.
No, but in general, because we also work and live in the same place, we kind of work quite a lot in make the house comfortable for us and for the people that work with us. So no, we didn't change almost anything in this process in these like 2 months. I have to say we enjoyed it much more, because actually it's the first time since we moved here that we don't have anybody around. So for the first time, we really enjoyed
a lot of space.
Yeah, being pajama during the day.
That I can tell you, my kids, it's impossible to get them out of the pajama. So now we have a dictator. I totally understand. So in the traveling, now we've said that you will be traveling less, but what do you think is going to happen there? Because obviously now we are obliged not to travel. Yes. Many people think that once this first phase will go, everything is going to go back in terms of traveling.
Yeah.
What have you thought about that?
Yes, and honestly, our biggest fear is that actually things will go back to as they were. So I think we should never go through such a traumatic experience for everyone, and considering that the way to go forward is going back. I mean, we must learn something out of this experience. And for instance, in our case, we are really considering the way we work and trying to make it much more responsible in terms of CO2 emissions, for instance, with traveling. And we will try to travel much less, and at the same time find ways, for instance, to participate in debate, lectures, and programs like this in other ways than our presence. So that could be maybe producing custom-made videos, or having actors impersonating ourselves and giving a lecture. I don't know what, but we need to find other ways than just traveling constantly for work.
Especially also when it comes to sometimes having meetings for work. I think the 90% of those meetings were completely useless, There is only a few meetings that are very important. Maybe it's the one where you have a prototype or where you really need to speak about important things. But for the rest, I mean, we can definitely do it by phone, and we are doing it like nowadays, and works perfectly. So, and plus, I think social distancing will allow the fact that flight will cost a lot, because the only way of be able to travel with a safe distance is to make, again, travel costing. And I have to say, it's also probably needed. I mean, the last year it was unbearable that we could travel 3 days a week for €20, Amsterdam, Catania. It's absolutely stupid, and I think this should not be even allowed anymore.
So I'm going to throw you again a provocative question, but il Salone del Mobile in Milan, no? It's been for a lot of design, but also not designers, a moment of a lot of people getting together, ideas floating, a commercial moment, but also kind of an iconic moment for design. And now, if you were given the possibility to be the curators of the next Salone, what would be the approach, and how would you organize it?
It's quite an interesting question, and then I let you speak. It's something that we are thinking about it in this moment, because how can we be meaningful in the sense that we don't know what yet, but how can we be meaningful next year? Because I think we can't go back as if nothing happened. It's absolutely not the way of dealing with it.
Well, I think the most important thing, is to put as the first thing in the agenda that sustainability and ecological development should be at the center of everything that is happening in any industry. So that would be the first suggestion that I think that is vital, which also means, for instance, be more considerate in the participations of this event, not necessarily, for instance, coming every year to present maybe the same products, maybe making much smaller shows, smaller presentations, but with meaningful things. So to understand also that not necessarily scale is what it matters, but it's actually what you have to say. So to sort of reduce to the necessity, in the moment you do a presentation, which I think it can be effective because I don't think we need to see every year the same products restylized differently. you know.
But in show, you know, in fashion, in this moment, they're talking about fashion shows. Yves Saint Laurent has decided, to skip the September show and do it in other moments. I'm just making similarity because I think it's interesting to look and contaminate in a positive way. Contaminate maybe is not the right word in this moment, but yeah, to cross-fertilize and. This idea of and Armani saying that you know they don't want to do anymore the season that is not the counter season. This idea of diluting and having kind of a show all the year round instead of concentrating and people arriving with something when you're ready. Is it something feasible, or in fact you need your public? Because the problem is the public. You know, you can do it whenever you want, wherever you want. But if people are not there, and you have to fly them in to make them come, that's the problem. Now you need to have an idea and also public. What do you think about this?
You know, we of course we're not an expert of the fashion system. Nevertheless, I think probably the cruise fashion shows were the most crazy one because they were all happening in different moments. Flying group of journalists all over the world, and they were the most insane, the most polluting. So I think that whatever we need to think from now on, it must be reasonable in terms of the impact that we will have in the environment. I think we have tons of ideas on how fashion shows, for instance, could be redesigned. Because if there is a thing that is extremely interesting for us, is this idea of how to make temporary events and temporary interventions more sustainable, because of course they are the most wasteful. So I think that the problem of reaching a public, I think in this moment it is not that of an issue because of course we have digital tools.
Of course.
Even if you want to be like physical, you can do that. I mean, you can do a movie with all the collection, and then, you know, like there are theater in all over the world, and then you organize like a screening that is only for the people that comes in the city. I mean, you can be so much inventive, and you can enjoy also the fact that you don't need to travel to see something that in any case, at the end of the game, you're gonna in any case look at it in your phone and in your PC. So maybe we should implement this digital side already at the beginning of the thinking.
And probably fashion shows should go back to be for the people that actually buys the fashion, for retailers, not like for a carousel of people that don't have anything to do with the fashion shows and with fashion in terms of product. So I think it is exciting, and I think what we will see in the future, and the future is next week, basically.
For fashion, yes.
Right. That's the interesting part. And as you said, a lot of things are going to change. Everyone doesn't know what is going to be the new. So, that's the real interesting part. You can rewrite your story and somehow to do something new. But
I do understand that there are a lot of like interest. You know, there are cities they are living because of like the fashion show. I mean, I think Milano, Paris, New York, London. I mean, of course, it's quite important also those event stays. But then I think they can work more creatively in rethinking about it. It was too insane.
Of course. So now I'm going to go push you a little bit further in what you know, obviously is my industry, and I'm interested there. You know, you talked a lot about sustainability, and fashion is all about creating desire, a lot of desire, a lot of times around to buy and buy and buy. Valextra is a product that is a brand that is committed to timeless. We don't do discounts. Our product has been around for decades and decades. So for us, sustainability means creating products that last over time. We can do it well, we can do it not well. People can like it or dislike it, but that's the philosophy. Contemporary, but still timeless. What is your suggestion, your idea of what sustainability should be in the fashion world?
Yeah, well, you know, of course, that's what you just described. The idea of timelessness, it is already a great starting point. The second is that I know each fashion brand, the biggest, they all have a sustainable department within the fashion brands. But this sustainable development is often not linked to the design department. I think that's the problem. So the R&D, the research and development, the sustainable development has to be much more in connection with who is designing the products. Otherwise, change cannot really happen. And in regards of fashion, but also leather products, I think what is important is really look at where you source the materials and understanding, for instance, if you can do something in there in terms of guaranteeing that, the skins that you're using, they come from animals that lived in
byproducts.
Exactly, in a healthy way and so on. So there's plenty of things that can be done.
Like repairing is something super important. And I know like the bigger brand has like sometimes like the repairing facilities, even beyond, how do you call it?
The warranty.
No, of course. We have pieces of the 50s.
Exactly.
Because for us was more also sentimental. If someone cares so much to keep a bag for 60, 70 years and they come to repair it, it's because, not because they can't buy another bag, but because they really care. It's part of their life.
Exactly.
So it's, there's something beautiful about that.
Absolutely. But then exactly also the fact that you can bond much more with your client. I think that's absolutely important. Giving like a passport on each of the bag, for instance, or that you sell, where, you show all the step that the production was done for the specific object. So who did it, when,
which
material,
transparency, basically.
Transparency, I think, is one of the most important values that I think it should be conveyed nowadays.
And what do you know a little bit about us? What are the things that you feel are connect a little bit with your philosophy? What are the things that you think you would inject to like there's a lot of people looking at us, but this is for me is what is a dialogue. It's interesting to have. So what do you think it's needed? Now it's always this tension between timeless and contemporary, and sometimes you're lost. Because you try to be both, and somehow you lose one or the other. What are things that you like about us, and things that you would tweak?
Well, I think definitely what you described, the idea of timelessness, for us definitely it has a great appeal. And the quality of productions and materials.
Yeah.
I think those are two things that resonate with us because it's our practice is based on this. So I think that, and of course,
but also the specialization in one things, like what I really love about Valextra is this one, that you are not producing, like a range of different kind of product. I mean, you're specialized in that, and the specialization in these cases, I think it works very well because you can control much more the chain of production.
So if I had told you, okay, guys, you can do one thing for Valextra, what you want to do? Like a table, a bag, what would be something that, just instinctively, what would be your
it's never
advice?
about the product.
What?
It's never about a product. I think
of
what
course.
we would like to do is to go and speak with the people that give you the skins and understanding, for instance, how much which are the skins that are discarded and why, if we could, for instance, find ways of implementing those, if we can educate the user in understanding the process of making those pieces, and re-looking at the whole process, and then we give you an answer, but we don't know what it is.
Then I would say that in general, I think what we are interested in any case is to make the product more than thinking about, the furniture. I think focus on the product, I think it's something that we would be interested in, for sure.
And aesthetics or functionality comes first?
Functionality.
For bags or for design products? This is more, I just like to understand how you think. Where do you start from?
I think functionality, but of course functionality can be a lot of different things. I think aesthetic has also functional values. So I don't think one excludes the other, and I don't think one is the opposite of the other. And I don't think that aesthetic is something that is, or beauty is something irrelevant. I think ugliness is irrelevant, and even more laziness is irrelevant. So I think beauty it can have an ethical component if it means that it is also to do with timelessness, the quality of materials, the craftsmanship, the consideration for all those steps that make a product great.
So what do you define beauty? No, what's something that for you? I've asked this to Rudy Dordoni, and it was interesting. So I'm curious to know. It's an instinctive, no, it's emotional. After you try to rationalize beauty, but
you know what?
What does drive you? What?
We don't think about it.
Yeah, I have to say, well, since we are here in Holland, Holland is one of the most pragmatic and Calvinist. You can't speak about beauty when you are in Holland.
So we became
Italians the opposite.
I know. So think about 2 Italians in Holland, how it goes.
Exactly. So, well, we don't have a clear idea. For us, beauty is when a project is right. When a project is right and you are true to yourself and you follow, a clear path, it's both beautiful and functional. You can't skip that.
So I'm going to take you back to one other project that you have done that I really loved because it's another, and we have just another 12 minutes, but I think it's nice to close on this. Now you did una mostra with Bernini and Caravaggio, two monsters in the good sense of a history of both actually lived in a very similar period, actually the same period in the 500s, the Rinascimento. So how did you work with this element of historical, cultural, that I know is also so much part of your studio?
So, well, the museum that organized the exhibition was the Rijksmuseum here in Amsterdam.
Of course.
And of course, we were totally excited when they asked us to do the exhibition design for the show. Because of course, we were very busy in the period, but then we started discussing between the two of us. And I remember that I told Andrea, okay, we don't have time, but when in life we will ever have the chance to decide where to put the Bernini and the Caravaggio.
Exactly.
So we love to do the exhibition because the pieces were stunning. Actually, the exhibition was about Baroque in Rome, so it was also including other artists. And what we did actually was really to look into the cliché of the Baroque exhibitions, which generally are dark with dramatic lighting, emphasizing even more the characteristic of the paintings and the sculptures. And in a way, we thought that was too redundant. And so we did the opposite. We treated the space almost as a contemporary art space. So we had uniform lighting as much as possible, very bright, because we thought that there was no need to emphasize what the artist is already saying it so clearly. We don't need to emphasize, those elements are typical of Baroque because we already have those and the artists are so eloquent with that. So we try to strip down as much as possible the exhibition. And then we use a lot of color in the show, choosing colors that they were very difficult to obtain in the historical period that Caravaggio was working. So we basically used those tones of colors that, because of the restrained palette of colors they had available, they would have been difficult to work with. So we had lilac, saffron yellow, lime. So all those colors that were possible but very complicated to obtain.
Yeah, and something that I think it was interesting while, especially installing, when all the not the lenders came to see actually where we were placing their own, beautiful painting, was a discussion that we had with them. Like for instance, there was this lady that was the loan to the museum, a beautiful Artemisia Gentileschi painting. They showed me the pictures of when and where it was like putting in his own house, with a cradle in front of the painting, with the children. They were like making joke and doing selfie in front of the painting. It was amazing to see actually the real life of those paintings that all the time we see in museums, but we never thought that people actually are owning it and they are living with it. So we have this kind of personal stories and personal proximity that you never have actually when
with these artworks.
Yeah, when you work with these artworks, when you visit these artworks.
So you really tried also to make it the contemporary part, an eye of a more contemporary museum, to make people understand it more.
Absolutely, because we thought that the works are extremely contemporary, but the way that people are used to see them is this, old-fashioned paintings, which they are not, because great art is never, old-fashioned. So we tried simply to emphasize how contemporary these pieces are.
Yeah.
And as a reference, we started from basically the classics of Italian exhibition design. We looked a lot at the works of Carlo Scarpa and Palazzo Battellis in Palermo and Castelvecchio, and that was the main reference for the work.
I'm hearing a lot of the designers in this period talking about Scarpa. Why do you think so? Why is such it's always been like, but suddenly it's kind of, the reference of Scarpa, it's very much in the head. Patricio Ercola talked about it, and in general, we used it last year. I don't know. What's your point of view?
Like everything like Carlo Scarpa did, especially when it comes to museums, because most of the work he did for museum are the most known. Almost they are still there, they're timeless, and I think there is this needs of like timelessness now.
Also, I'm from the Veneto region.
Okay, so
yeah, so I grew up with it and I loved it, because I remember the first time I visited Castelvecchio in Verona, and I was totally overwhelmed, and I really thought I was probably 15, and I couldn't realize how a person could be so imaginative and thinking everything in so many details that I thought I will never be an architect or a designer. This is too much, and I still bear that in mind.
Okay, thank God this has not happened. He inspired you as a mentor more than. So I'm going to just ask you a couple of last things. So when you in Holland, I think you can go out. Now you just have to be careful. But when you will be free again to go back and without going too much back, what is something that you're really missing, that you're looking forward to go back and free? Like, we talk about things that we don't want to go back. What is something that you really feel you want to go back for?
That again, we are not really, I mean, it's horrible to say, but we are not really missing anything at the moment. We feel very good. But I have to say that the other day, for the first time, I thought about the feeling of being in a restaurant and getting like great prepared food and not just me making it. And a glass of wine, and I thought that mundane thing that we were used to, I really miss it. It's very simple, but I miss to go out to the restaurant and have like some food cooked by somebody else.
Yeah, and probably I miss a bit Italy. Like as much as I can like to be here in Holland, I miss Tuscany, I miss Milan, Sicily. I miss the beauty of the country. That when you are from afar, you just you get a bit nostalgic. So I miss that.
So what was your plan before coronavirus for the summer? What was?
We
had an amazing plan for spring and summer.
We were planning like weeks of holidays in Tuscany and in other places. And
South America. We wanted to do a bit like something that, because we worked really intensely in the last year. So we thought, okay, we want to take a bit of like months free to also think about the future of the studio that we are thinking of at the moment. So that's good in any case. But, we wanted to be a bit out of here. But I have to say, the fact that we are in any case alone in this moment gave us exactly the same feeling of being on holiday and thinking. So.
And then we will finally have our puppy next week.
Exactly, so that's our home.
So that is exactly the new addition to the family.
Absolutely.
And after it's all about the puppy. Forget about each other. Okay, so guys, thank you so much. And on Friday, we are going to have someone that is not a designer. We felt that it was interesting to mix it up. I looked at your interviews and I thought that they were incredibly interesting because you mixed. And we're going to have Tim Blanks, that is a journalist in fashion, but it's more than journalist in fashion, is a journalist. So changing completely the role and having him it's going to be interesting. So because again, we love design. We think design is really a bridge between also art and fashion, and it allows us to go through ideas. Let's go back to the people from fashion and let's hear what they have to give us. In the meantime, I want to thank you so much. I love your work. I'm going to think about the leather project because I'm still, you know, we are going to do something together with Valextra, and I'm thinking and looking forward. But at the moment, congratulations.
Thank you.
Ciao, grazie mille. Grazie.
Ciao.
Ciao.